So you survived the Christmas chaos and we've almost ended January. Can you recall, did it actually feel like Christmas this year? Does it ever feel like Christmas? How should Christmas even feel? The reason I'm asking about feelings in this Children's Leaders Network will make sense in a moment. But I confess, Advent this year just ran away from me. That well-intentioned time for preparation was strangled by to-do lists and by sellotape and by guilt. But there were two redeeming moments for me. And one was being caught completely off guard by Canterbury Cathedral Choir, singing O Magnum Mysterium by Morton Lauridsen, which took me inwardly screaming into a place of rest, subjected to that ethereal beauty that I sometimes need, where I simply admit that God is a mystery to me, and I feel like a child in my unknowing. There I sat, carol sheet in my hands and tears welling up in my eyes. It's been a while since I felt God like that, through emotion. The second redeeming moment was on Boxing Day with a house of 14. All ages, children, parents, grandparents, aunts, great aunts, all crammed into the kitchen. You know the scene. All talking, laughing, singing into the night. And it was a time when I paused and looked 360 around the room, thinking intergenerational church might just have been God's intention all along. So believing that God is present through our being with one another, I again recognized in that moment my need to do things, my need to gather people, wanting to make things happen, my action-centered spirituality. So we have emotion and action. Welcome to tonight's question. Which model fits? Production line, greenhouse, or Pilgrim? It's a question which takes us into the realm of 4 children's spiritual styles: word, emotion, symbol, and action, and relies heavily upon the research of David Sinos in his book, Children's Ministry That Fits. Sinos knows, like we suspect, that one size does not fit all, just like different moments of Christmas speak to us in different ways. From a young age, he recalls a sense of mystery and beauty in his home church. Being made to leave halfway through the service to go down to the basement to experience the kids' work, he comments that there may have been cookies and crafts downstairs, but those sweet treats and creative activities could not compete with the transcendental traditions of the Mass and the symbolic beauty of the church building. So my Canterbury experience resonates with his Catholic one. Before we address these 4 spiritual styles any further, let's outline the 3 models, then try to locate ourselves and the way we currently lead children's work in our own settings. Which model fits you? Since the medieval period, there have been 3 ways of thinking about how we influence children. Are they merely items on a production line? Are we churning out smaller versions of ourselves? Are they in the greenhouse, developing through stages like a maturing plant? Or are they pilgrims, a slightly more disturbing approach because we will need to spend a lot more time growing with them and growing ourselves in the process? To summarize, we either do things to children, for children, or with children. Let's see the first style in this picture. Medieval art of the 1400s shows how awkward artists found it to render children. As you can see, the sophistication of the fingers and the maturity of the face. Often artists painted children simply as smaller adults, because we know they will become adults. So until that point, they're in a process of gradually becoming like us, fulfilling that foregone conclusion. This is the production line. But this gets complicated when we think of the mindset of some adults or the way we adults live out our faith. The child in this Madonna and child image looks rather unimpressed, more like a young adult resenting his place in the picture than a wondering, playful child obsessed with the present who just cannot sit still. In the production line, children need adults to do things to them. Education is an act of depositing information from a teacher to students who receive, memorize, and repeat, even Christian teaching. Children are sometimes regarded as raw material. It's a banking model of passive sponges. And that's how I learnt maths at school, reciting times tables at the front of the class. But we know that factual knowledge doesn't bring about change. One of my most memorable conversations as an early Christian in my 20s was with a genius who led the problem-solving demonstrations of toys at Hamleys in London. And he locked horns with me over the Christian faith. The problem was he had read every word of the Bible. He knew it inside out. But I hadn't. Yet I was the professing Christian, and he wasn't. He had all the information, but it hadn't moved him in any way. Certainly not in the way I'd been moved, simply by meeting another Christian and reading about Thomas and his encounter with the resurrected Jesus. So the production line model can leave little room for inquiry. One friend told me to let children walk around in Bible stories. Imagine being certain characters, picture the scene, wonder about people's feelings. God experience, not being God smart, is the intention. So children should not just take our prep and we feel like our job is done because we've delivered all the information to them. Secondly, the greenhouse. In the greenhouse, children need adults to do things for them. This paradigm is based on theories of human development. Children have been seen as divine seeds to be nurtured. All we have to do as adults is watch Gardener's World, ensuring physical, spiritual, and educational environments are suited to their growth. Now, I'm pretty awful at gardening. I'm too heavy-handed and most of what I touch dies. But this approach is about providing the right conditions and hoping that children move towards predetermined life stages. This model is like painting by numbers. We make the right moves for them to emerge and flourish. So you as leader create the space, the curriculum, the song videos, and hope that what we provide between the ages of 5 to 11 moves them towards what we think eventually a Christian teenager might look like. But of course, we're not them. We've got no idea what it's like to grow up in 2023. No one had to disciple me through the storms of a pandemic, or through climate anxiety, or to find my way past online influencers such as Andrew Tate, competing for the minds of those as young as 6. In the greenhouse, us as leaders can never do enough because surrounding conditions are constantly changing. So thirdly, we arrive at the Pilgrim model, in which children are active with adults. This model came at the end of the 20th century and values children as active agents who make meaning of the world around them. Children are spiritual pilgrims who walk with adults on the journey of life. We leaders become co-learners in knowing God. This is a more intergenerational approach, and these kinds of churches include children in their core CORE practices. It's risky, yes, because we feel less in control, I suppose. But we might remember our last session of Children's Leaders Network, where we acknowledged how God works through the vulnerable and teaches us through children. So if we're going to successfully pilgrim with our children, one help may be to take note of their different spiritual styles. And Sinos identifies these as word, emotion, symbol, and action. Now, word is where scripture has priority. It's about intellect and the mind. People of this style believe that if it is not grounded in the Bible, our work is just morality training. Secondly, emotion, this is the way of feelings, like I experienced through the music at Canterbury. But some children don't engage with feelings, mainly churches. Beware of this if you invest lots of time in music making. So they might keep any spiritual experiences private or believe something is wrong with them. A bit like Charlie Brown. Remember, I asked you if it felt like Christmas this year.
think there must be something wrong with me, Linus. Christmas is coming, but I'm not happy. I don't feel the way I'm supposed to feel. I just don't understand Christmas, I guess. I like getting presents and sending Christmas cards and decorating trees and all that, but I'm still not happy. I always end up feeling depressed.
Charlie Brown, you're the only person I know who can take a wonderful season like Christmas and turn it into a problem.
So, despite the trappings, Charlie is told by Linus that he is the only person who can take a wonderful season like Christmas and turn it into a problem. I think Charlie is deeply spiritual, but his personality cannot be fed just by an emotional spiritual style. So we move to symbol, the mystics, those who need visuals, objects, who love the natural world. They love peace. They love creating things. They love ritual. My officer for many years in London was Major David Drake, and I can't honestly tell you one sermon he preached. But what I do know is that every person who attended his Good Friday service in the late 1990s remembers him, along with his wife, who was carrying on the service. He walked off the platform and replaced his tunic with some overalls and picked up some tools and began building a huge wooden cross. You know, the sawdust was all around our feet. He built this cross and raised it by the end of that service. Symbol. I've never forgotten it. And finally, the action spiritual style. This is the road to justice and making an impact. Sinos says, I quote, "We need to let young people of this spiritual style see the tears in the eyes of the poor, the oppressed, and the marginalized," unquote. Traditionally, the spiritual style of the Salvation Army, closely followed by emotion due to its abundance of musical ability. But this least common spiritual style in children requires experience. It requires hearing about international development projects, sponsoring families overseas, or the food banks on home soil, or maybe Bertie Grill's school uniform exchange in Murfield that's hit our press. Now, I was a late developer. I remember my first soup run in London as a teenager, the first alcoholic I befriended, the first person I knew who was dependent on drugs. I can still recall the anger in me at what I thought was apathy in the wider church. But it wasn't. It was a warning to me that we become dangerous if we move towards an extreme version of one dominant spiritual style. So in conclusion, I believe that we should remain sensitive to all four of the spiritual styles within our children's work, noticing them as we walk with children. Perhaps this might even impact the way we gather as churches long term. But because we are all secretly different, Sinos calls this being harmoniously dissonant, where we bring together different styles in a manner that nurtures and challenges everyone towards growth. I tend to move between spiritual styles at different times in my life, but I try to hold on to one working definition of them, which is that in order for God to be alive in me, then just now I need to do this. So one style isn't better than the rest, but perhaps one model could be.